Hey, folks, it's time for the quote of the day, and today we're going to be quoting one of the most influential civil rights leaders in human history. I'm not overselling that. Everyone knows his name, and everyone knows the impact that he's had in this world, and that is Nelson Mandela. Today is Nelson Mandela's birthday. Now, I know that there are a lot of people that just know his name. There are many of us that are, Gen X or older that kind of grew up knowing about him, remember the concerts and the push to get him freed. But I think a lot of people have maybe forgotten or maybe don't tend to necessarily look at that part of history too well. So we're going to talk about that a little bit because the quote that I have chosen for today is one that you have to know what he went through. You have to understand who he was as a man. And so I'm not going to give you like in-depth history or anything like that, but I think you should understand just a few things. First of all, Nelson Mandela was a very fiery young man, to say the least, and was trying his hardest through whatever means he could to break the racist system of apartheid in South Africa. And this included violent means. I think it was in 1961 or 19, I don't remember the year exactly. It was 60 or 61. He basically helped form the violent, militant, I guess you could say, arm of the resistance movement that would then go about sabotaging and getting into basically violent firefights with the apartheid government of South Africa. This went on for a few years until 62 when he was captured. And he was held as a terrorist. He believed, when he was very young, obviously, that he was going to be put to death. He thought he was going to be hung. He thought he was going to be made an example of. But the government didn't want to martyr him. And so instead, they imprisoned him. And this is where you get to the point where, as we all know, Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years. And I remember it was like 1990 or 91, something like that. Maybe it wasn't 90. I don't remember, but it was around that time where they started to have concerts and there started to be a real big international push with actors and musicians and politicians all calling for his release and calling for apartheid to be done away with. And I remember it really really well. It was this point in time when I didn't really, I mean, in 1990 I was 15 years old. I didn't have a reason to care about global politics, and the name Nelson Mandela really didn't mean much. Didn't even really understand what apartheid was at the time, but I knew it was bad and I knew it was racist, right? Like I knew that it was institutionalized racism. It was systemic racism at like the highest level. And really, quite honestly, it's what America has had and is moving back towards, and we need to be aware of it. We need to know how this is working and how these things come about and what it looks like. Voting rights are a good example of this. The way that the U.S. government is disenfranchising a good portion of people that are not white is a good example of how these kind of things really start to take place. And that was one of the things that Nelson Mandela was fighting for his whole life was voting rights for everyone in South Africa. Now, he was in jail, like I said, for 27 years. And this is a man that he wasn't just in jail, like, oh, no big deal. He just has to eat shitty food for 27 years. He was in essentially the South African version of Alcatraz. It was called Robben Island. And he was there for, like I said, for 27 years. Now, he didn't face the same torture. I mean, that's really all you can say. The same violence that other inmates there did because of his name, because of his stature. But he began leading demonstrations. He began organizing inside the prison. And he organized not just the prisoners, but the wardens as well, to demand better treatment, to demand better, access to food and things like that. Like he really did show what it meant to be a leader in that position. But what's interesting about it is that this is a man that goes away for 27 years, and for 27 years, like basically the prime of his life, he is forced to just be nothing. Like he's everybody outside knows his name, and he's getting mail and shit like that, but he doesn't really have any power. All he has is localized power, is just what's there in the prison. And he had all of the reasons, all of the reasons to be angry, all of the reasons he went in angry. He had all of the reasons to hate. He really did. And thinking about it honestly, just saying it right now, it really is a testament to who this man became, to who he really was. He found a way, and I don't know how he did it because I don't think I could. He found a way to forgive and forget, not necessarily forget, but to forgive and look for a way forward. He used to say, one of his quotes was that he believed very strongly in leading from the back. He believed that people should, that you should tell people where to go, and then you should let them kind of lead their own way to it. He really did believe that you should let them feel like they got there first, because that made them, more. It made them feel better, basically. And I think that that's a powerful statement as to how he became what he became. He got to watch these other inmates, and he got to lead them in a way that made him realize that their anger, right? He saw what it did to them. He saw how it destroyed a lot of them, how it took the essence of their life away, and how a lot of them probably died there. And it made him not more of a, he didn't give him necessarily temperance, but it showed him that there are many different kinds of prisons. And a lot of us keep ourselves in our own prisons. A lot of us do. Most of us do. All of us do at some level. Now, as far as the quote goes, I needed you to understand those things before I gave you this quote, because I think that it is profoundly important to everyone, but especially when we're thinking about Nelson Mandela. He once said, "As I walked out the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." Let me read that again. As I walked out the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about, most of you can't even imagine prison. Many of you can't imagine just regular jail, but try to imagine, like, you can go find images of the cell that he was in, and just imagine being in this room for 27 years, being there because you were fighting for black people to be treated as equals. You were there to be made an example of. You had every reason to hate. You had every reason to carry that with you, but you knew that if you did, that you would never ever get out of jail. Like, you would always be in that prison. Part of you would always be there. And so you have to let it go. This thing that probably through a good portion of that time is what kept him going. His anger, his bitterness, his hatred. These are the things that keep you going when you're in that position. And then he has to let them go. And what's left is the man that we all know and think of, this amazing, wonderful person that came out and became the president of South Africa in the first time that black people and white people could vote together. They all voted for Nelson Mandela. He became the grand unifier. He became something that this country, America, that country, the world desperately need today. Someone with a message of unity, of love, one that doesn't come from a wishy-washy bullshit religious perspective, but one that is real and cemented, and someone that has suffered and came out the other side as an inspiration. Happy birthday to Nelson Mandela, and to the rest of you. Take care of yourself. Take care of others. I'll talk to you soon.